Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this because today we are tackling one of the absolute most famous, most captivating modern legends in human history. We're talking about the Bermuda Triangle. Now, for decades, this specific patch of ocean has just completely haunted our collective imagination, right? But today, we're going to look strictly at the facts, break down the actual evidence, and figure out what is really going on out there in the water.
To truly understand this legend, we have to go back to the exact event that ignited the whole mystery. Picture this. The date is December 5th, 1945. It's just a completely normal afternoon in Florida, and 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers take off for a routine 3-hour training mission. This was known as Flight 19. The weather is totally clear, the crew is led by a highly experienced pilot and war veteran, everything is perfectly normal, and then, well, suddenly it wasn't.
So, at 2:10 p.m., they take off. But just about 2 hours later, their squadron leader, Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, reports something super alarming. His compass has just suddenly stopped working. He switches to his backup compass, and no way, that one fails too. Utterly confused, he asks the other pilots for their coordinates, but their instruments are malfunctioning as well. By 4:56 p.m., complete disorientation sets in. Taylor thinks they're over the Gulf of Mexico and orders the planes to fly east. But other crew members are arguing over the radio that they're already east of Florida and need to fly west. The weather starts to rapidly deteriorate. By sunset, they are completely lost in the dark and estimated 370 kilometers east of Florida. Finally, at 7:04 p.m., we get the absolute last radio transmission from Taylor. After that, total silence.
27. That is the total number of human beings who vanished that night. You see, it wasn't just the 14 crew members of Flight 19. When they lost contact, a massive search and rescue Mariner aircraft carrying 13 rescue workers took off to go find them. And while looking for Flight 19, that rescue plane just disappeared too. Despite launching one of the largest air and sea search operations of the entire era, searchers found absolutely nothing. Not a single body, not a single piece of wreckage.
Right before they vanished, one of the pilots on Flight 19 sent out this incredibly chilling radio transmission. "We don't know which way is west." It's terrifying, right? And this very incident became the bedrock for a much larger global mystery, because Flight 19 wasn't an isolated event.
Section 1. Expanding the legend. Centuries of unexplained disappearances.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer scale. We are talking about a massive stretch of water bound by Florida, Puerto Rico, and the island of Bermuda. Covering over 500,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean, reports over a 50-year time frame claimed that an astonishing 3,000 ships and 100 planes had gone missing in this specific stretch of water.
And the lore goes back a lot further than 1945. All the way back in 1492, Christopher Columbus reported that his compass malfunctioned when passing through this exact area. Then you have the terrifying tale of the Ellen Austin in 1881. This ship encountered a totally abandoned ghost ship out in the water. The captain of the Ellen Austin put some of his own crew on the ghost ship to sail it back, but a storm separated them. When the captain found the ship again, his crew had vanished without a trace. And in 1918, the USS Cyclops, which was one of the biggest ships in the U.S. Navy, carrying 306 people and 11,000 tons of manganese, disappeared on a beautifully clear day on its way from the West Indies to Brazil. Its final message said simply, "Leather fair, all well."
By the way, quick funny historical side note about that ghost ship the Ellen Austin encountered. The owner of the Ellen Austin was allegedly so terrified by the whole disappearing crew incident that he sold his ship to a German company. And what did they rename it? The Meta. Yeah, long before social media even existed, people were already getting totally creeped out by the Meta.
So the area clearly had a pretty dark reputation, earning names in the 18th and 19th centuries like the Graveyard of the Atlantic and the Sea of Doom. But the myth as we know it today truly went viral globally in 1964, when a writer named Vincent H. Gaddis published an article for Argosy magazine titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. He basically summarized all these disparate disappearances, linking them together to create a unified, highly sensationalized mystery. Books, movies, and songs quickly followed. The modern myth was officially born. Of course, popular culture absolutely loves a good sea monster or an alien abduction story. But we're here to understand the facts, put on our detective hats, and look for some actual rational answers.
Section 2. The scientific investigation. Finding rational answers.
Remember how Christopher Columbus and the pilots of Flight 19 both reported that their compasses suddenly stopped working properly? Well, science actually has an incredibly straightforward explanation for this. The Earth has geographic north, the actual physical top of the globe, and magnetic north, which is where a compass points. Usually, you have to account for the difference between the two. But there are specific places on Earth called agonic lines where the two align perfectly. And guess what? For the last 200 to 300 years, the 0-degree agonic line has been located right in the area of the Bermuda Triangle. This perfectly explains all that compass confusion.
Furthermore, let's just look at the actual geography and weather of this region. The water here is quite shallow, full of hidden shoals that easily trap ships. But more importantly, look at the top 3 countries globally for hurricane frequency. You've got China, the USA, specifically the state of Florida, and Cuba. The Bermuda Triangle is squeezed right between Florida and Cuba. It is literally one of the most frequent hotspots for brutal hurricanes and waterspouts in the entire world.
And this brilliantly illustrates another really fascinating scientific possibility, the methane hydrate theory. Scientists in Australia conducted lab experiments showing that underwater mud volcanoes can erupt, releasing massive fields of methane bubbles into the ocean. When this methane floods the water, it drastically lowers the water's density. If a ship happens to be sailing over this exact spot when an eruption occurs, it instantly loses buoyancy and just sinks like a rock, without any time to even send a warning.
To wrap your head around this, just think of the exact opposite of the Dead Sea. In the Dead Sea, high salt content equals high density, making it virtually impossible for a person to sink. You just naturally float right on top. Methane does the exact reverse. It creates a low-density pocket of water where ships simply cannot float. Now, to be perfectly clear, while this is a scientifically proven phenomenon, there is no direct evidence that a methane eruption specifically caused any of the famous Bermuda Triangle disappearances. But it proves that the ocean holds physical dangers far scarier than sea monsters. However, if we want to truly solve this mystery, we've got to look away from oceanography entirely.
Section 3. The psychological twist. The real culprit behind the mystery.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding a cognitive bias known as the Bader-Meinhof effect, or the frequency illusion. Think about a time you or maybe a family member bought a new car. Suddenly, over the next few weeks, you start seeing that exact same model of car everywhere you look on the road. Did everyone in your town suddenly buy that car? No way. The frequency didn't change at all. But because you are now paying attention to it, your brain just hyperfixates on it.
This everyday illusion is the real culprit behind the Bermuda Triangle. Once Vincent H. Gaddis gave this area a catchy, terrifying name back in 1964, people started noticing it. Suddenly, every single time a ship or plane sank in this specific area, it made global headlines as part of the Triangle mystery. Meanwhile, ships and aircraft tragically disappear in oceans all over the world, like the Malaysian Airlines flight, which was nowhere near the Bermuda Triangle. But we naturally ignore those regular disappearances while completely sensationalizing the ones that happen to fit our spooky narrative.
Journalist Larry Kush, who wrote the book The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, dug deep into the historical records and concluded that the legend was basically built on mystery mongering. He discovered that as the legend grew, people started exaggerating things. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just exaggerated. He found that people were totally fabricating stories. Remember the terrifying tale of the Ellen Austin ghost ship we talked about earlier? Yeah, Kush found that much of that story was likely entirely made up. So where does this leave us today? Well, it's time to see what the heavy-hitting experts have to say about this slice of the Atlantic.
Section 4. The final verdict. Case closed.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the United States Coast Guard don't even recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a hazardous area. The Coast Guard points out a simple fact of logistics. This area is heavily trafficked. I mean, it is literally one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. When you combine an incredibly high volume of ships and planes, shallow waters, the powerful Gulf Stream, and constant hurricanes, basic statistics dictate that accidents are going to happen. It really is not hard to see why ships might occasionally sink there.
And if you need further proof that the math just doesn't support the myth, consider this data point. In 2013, the World Wildlife Fund conducted a detailed, data-driven study to find the world's top 10 most dangerous bodies of water for shipping. And guess what? The Bermuda Triangle didn't even make the list. Statistically speaking, it's just a totally normal, albeit busy and stormy, part of the ocean. But before we wrap up this explainer, you might be asking one final question. We explained his compass issues, sure, but what about that strange, terrifying ball of fire that Christopher Columbus reported seeing fall from the sky into the ocean way back in 1492? What kind of alien or supernatural force could that have been?
It was just A meteor, a perfectly natural scientific occurrence that just happened to look spooky to a sailor 500 years ago. And that really brings us to the core takeaway of this explainer. The Bermuda Triangle isn't a graveyard crafted by sea monsters or aliens. It's really a monument to the power of human psychology and storytelling. It makes you wonder, right? What other mysteries or legends in your own life are really just the Baader-Meinhof effect, tricking your brain into seeing patterns that aren't actually there?